You're listening to the Jefferson Exchange. Thanks for joining us. The JX starts today with the debrief, where JPR reporters discuss the stories they've been covering this week, including the removal of two books from a Grants Pass High School library, construction delays holding up Yreka's first homeless shelter, and calling in the feds for federal investigations in Shasta County. Federal election investigations in Shasta County. I'm Liam Moriarty, JPR's interim news director.
I'm Justin Higginbottom, public health and safety reporter.
I'm Jane Vaughn, housing, homelessness, and education reporter.
And I'm Roman Battaglia, science, environment, and politics reporter.
Morning, folks.
Morning.
Morning.
Justin, let's start with you. You covered delays in opening Siskiyou County's first homeless shelter. Tell us why this has been harder than expected to get this open in time for winter.
Yeah, so for this story, I spoke with the program manager for Yreka Base Camp. Yreka Base Camp is a planned 32-bed shelter. It'll be, like you mentioned, the first in the county. And the nonprofit North Valley Catholic Social Services is the one behind building it. And it's a low barrier, meaning there are very few rules for those that can stay there. It was supposed to open 6 months ago before the winter, which would have been good because Yreka gets very cold and there's dozens of people right now living in tents at a few encampments around the city. But the program manager for the shelter said it's been a struggle to open for a lot of reasons. They're retrofitting an older building in Yreka to build this shelter. They're adding a kitchen and bathrooms and things like that. And she said first, just getting contractors and accessing building materials in Siskiyou County has been difficult. Contractors are really in high demand right now. But another reason, which I've found pretty interesting, a reason it's taken longer than expected is because of the red tape involved in building kind of anything in California, and this applies to shelters. So a lot of codes need to be followed. For example, making things accessible for wheelchair users, which most would say is a good regulation. There's a reason for that. But here, Tara Collins, that program manager for the shelter, said it's sort of been a case of the perfect being the enemy of the good.
We're looking at a situation where people that are bound to wheelchairs are literally living on a dirt hill that's very steep. So if they can't go over a tiny little bump to get into the building, that's not okay with code, but we don't care that they're living on a hill.
So local governments can pass what's called a declaration of a shelter crisis, and that cuts some of the bureaucracy and the red tape around building shelters. It's meant to speed up the process, but the city and county, for whatever reason, didn't pass that, and that's really contributed to this delay.
Now, in the story, you mentioned how authorities are waiting for the shelter to open before they start clearing homeless encampments. Is that right?
Yeah, so this summer's Supreme Court ruling, which Jane covered, it's a case out of Grants Pass. It basically allows local governments to clear homeless encampments, even if there's no place for those homeless to go, even if there's not a shelter available for them. And soon after that Supreme Court decision, Yreka passed a local ordinance to ban public camping that targets homeless people in the area. So they do have the power to clear these encampments that have been pretty persistent. There's a hill near downtown that all locals are aware of. It's had dozens of tents on it for years at this point. But authorities have waited voluntarily to clear those encampments until the shelter opens. Here's Tara Collins again.
The county and the city have been really good partners, and in a small community, everybody kind of knows everybody. And a lot of our homeless individuals that have some of the biggest challenges, these are people that are homegrown. You know, our city council members have known them. Our board of supervisor representative has known them since they were little kids, and they know that this isn't a problem that can just be pushed somewhere else.
So I found that interesting that many locals here don't really see the homeless at these encampments as outsiders. They know them, they're part of the community. Collins said best case scenario, the shelter will open in January, but she's not super optimistic for obvious reasons. The city is also building a tiny home village for the homeless, and we'll be following updates on this. I'm sure we'll report on something when everything gets off the ground.
Interesting. Thanks, Justin. Jane, you reported this week about two books being challenged, then removed from a high school library in Grants Pass. What happened there?
So basically, some community members had complained. Two people had filled out what's called a request for reconsideration of instructional materials form, very official name, and that had been submitted back in September. These two people wanted these two books to be reconsidered. I do think it's interesting that those residents don't have children in the school district, and they had not read the books that they wanted to have challenged. And then basically what happens is the superintendent also wanted two other books to be reconsidered because they had been mentioned in several public settings and in emails we have received. That's from a report from the district. So basically they formed a committee, 12-member committee, to read all four of the books and discuss them. That committee included staff, teachers, administration, parents, and the library media specialists, so sort of a broad swath of people. And then after their reading and discussion, they voted to remove two of the books from the Grants Pass High School library and to leave two of them on the shelves.
Okay, which two books were removed?
The first is called All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, and the other one is Lucky by Alice Sebold. So the first one is a memoir focusing on the author's Black queer identity, and the second's a memoir about the author's sexual assault. So those two have been removed from the Grants Pass High School library. The other two that are going to stay on the shelves are Flamer by Mark Corrado, and the other one is Beyond Magenta by Susan Cooklin. The district has not really given specific reasons why those two were removed and the other two are going to stay on the shelves. A district representative had said in a statement that the committee members discussed each book, they shared their thoughts and reasoning. The votes were cast by secret ballot, so we don't really know what the discussion was or why those two books were removed. They do have a list of selection criteria that includes things like providing accurate factual information, supporting and enriching varied interests and identities, representing differing viewpoints on controversial issues. So all these different things that they were sort of considering when they made their decision.
Factors, but we don't know which of those factors played in what ways.
Exactly, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Could you give us some more context? Has the district done this sort of thing before?
This is the first time the district has removed challenged books from a library. So they have removed books from core instruction before or restricted their use. But this is the first time they've actually removed a challenged book from the library. It's interesting, obviously, the sort of broader context that this is happening in. So All Boys Aren't Blue and Flamer are two of the top 10 most challenged books of 2023, according to the American Library Association. So the Grants Pass School District is not unique in that. And it's also interesting, given the school board is a little bit more conservative leaning for Grants Pass School District 7, and they're currently working on updating the school's policy on instructional and library materials. So kind of perfect timing here. And the teachers union has kind of pushed back a little bit against the proposed policy. They've said that it would create the potential for censorship. They didn't respond to my request for comment about this recent book removal now that two books have been removed. But there were 4 school board members who were endorsed by the county Republican Party who swept the election back in 2023. And so their policy discussions recently have revealed a little bit more of a shift to the right on the board. So we'll have to see what that final policy looks like once they finish it.
Okay. Thanks, Jane. Appreciate
Sure.
it. Roman, you reported on a pair of letters that the Shasta County supervisors sent this week to the U.S. Department of Justice. So what are the county supervisors asking the feds to do?
So they sent 2 letters asking for the DOJ to look into the election system in the county, which I know, what a surprise. A lot of election stuff happens in Shasta County all the time. Both these letters were brought forward by Patrick Jones, who's one of the more far-right people on the Board of Supervisors, and he's brought up election stuff a lot, including repeating some elections conspiracy theories that are kind of spread in far-right circles. And he primarily brought them forward now because he's about to be out of his supervisor's seat. He lost his primary election against a challenger back in March, and so he's going to be out by the end of the year. And so I wanted to bring these forward to ask
Gotcha.
the feds.
So tell us about these 2 issues that the supervisors are sending the letters about. What are they trying to get the feds to do?
Yeah, so one of the letters is more contentious than the other. The one that's not really contentious is about these time changes that happened on elections machines during the March primary election. The audit logs show these time adjustments that were happening that don't seem to have been done manually. And Jones says that the problem with that is it corrupts the audit log and it makes it harder to verify the integrity of the election. This happened with the new voting machines that the county is using. They dumped their last vendor based on unproven claims of election fraud last year. The second letter, which is more controversial, is about these printing issues with some of the ballots. The contractor who prints the ballots made a mistake, and a lot of the ballots had this tiny issue that made them impossible to read by the machine that scans the ballots. So
That's a big problem.
it is. Yeah, county staff had to spend a ton of time duplicating all of these ballots onto new pieces of paper so they could be scanned by the system. And Patrick Jones says there were major issues with this duplication process and that lots of mistakes were being made, but the local elections official says he's kind of misunderstood there.
What do the vendors who are the subject of these investigations? I mean, have they explained their side of these issues?
No, they haven't. I mean, the county has asked them to come and talk multiple times. I think their response has just been that they're not prepared enough to talk about it. So they just have kind of refused to show up and talk about this stuff right now.
Okay. So what's the county election official said about this?
Yeah, I mean, he says for the second letter for those duplication issues that the things that Patrick Jones thinks are mistakes are actually purposeful. The ballot scanner that was provided alternatively was intentionally spitting out all of these ballots that couldn't be scanned, and that's what it's supposed to do. So, the process of duplicating all these ballots manually is a good thing because it's showing that the machine is doing its job. And then about the audit logs and the time changes, he didn't have as much to say about that because he wasn't here when it happened. The previous elections official quit soon after that March primary election. And so, we'll kind of see what happens. They're going to send a letter right now, and then they're going to send a letter again after the Trump administration takes office because some of the supervisors don't think that the Biden DOJ will do anything about this.
Gotcha. Okay, well, ongoing election melodrama in Shasta County. Justin, back to you. You also reported on changes to Oregon's largest Medicaid provider that some therapists are saying could reduce mental health services to low-income folks. What's going on there?
Yeah, so this is a policy change for Care Oregon. Care Oregon's a parent group for several coordinated care organizations in the state. And those organizations basically get medical and healthcare access to low-income people through Oregon's Medicaid program. And in Oregon, right now therapists who have earned a degree, so right out of their master's, and they're still accruing the 1,900 client hours needed for their license, could accept Care Oregon members if they decided to work for themselves while in private practice, which many decide to do because it can take years to become a fully licensed therapist. Graduates likely have a lot of student debt, and they can make good money working for themselves and seeing low-income people insured with Care Oregon. But now Care Oregon has said that their members can no longer bill these therapists working in private practices. Their members need to go to an agency or a hospital or clinic, something in Care Oregon's network. And therapists can still take private insurance or cash pay if they're unlicensed but working in private practice, but probably not people on Medicaid at this point. And this decision limits options for low-income residents looking for therapy, according to those I spoke with. I spoke with someone from the Oregon Counseling Association, and they said, first, this limits career options for therapists in a time when the state really needs to convince more people actually to become therapists. Oregon ranks 47th in the country for prevalence of mental illness and access to care, those two components taken together. But they also said it removes options for clients. Some people would rather go to a therapist's private practice than go to an agency or clinic to receive that kind of care.
Sure. So what's the reason that Care Oregon gives for making the change?
So in a statement, Care Oregon said that they want to ensure members access to high-quality, clinically effective care. So I got from that, they want to just make sure members are receiving the best mental health services possible. But there may be another reason. These agencies that serve low-income people are struggling to hire enough early career therapists. Like I mentioned, many new grads decide to go into private practice before they're fully licensed because they can have more freedom and their pay can be better. And the director for the new director for the Oregon Health Authority actually did a statewide listening tour this year. And one of the findings from that was that the community health service providers said they're having a problem hiring and keeping therapists. And they blamed this on that policy, allowing new therapists to go into private practice while still being able to bill the state's Medicaid. So the OHA said, the OHA will likely have a rule change early next year to fix this, but it seems like this Care Oregon change in policy is an effort to funnel therapists into these community health providers, which you could see as a good thing because these organizations serve the most in need, but it could also reduce the number of people wanting to start out working as a therapist in Oregon.
Interesting. So that's Care Oregon is saying this is, well, they're not saying this, but the sense is that this is something that the state is looking to do to kind of get more of those early career therapists into the clinics and things.
Yeah, that's correct. And we can expect an OHA rule change coming up soon that kind of mimics Care Oregon's policy change.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Justin. And that's it for the debrief this week. Thanks for listening. You can reach the newsroom with comments on our coverage and suggestions for things we should cover in the future through our news tip line. You can find that on our website at ijpr.org. And you can find this program and more on our website at jeffexchange.org or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and all the other platforms.